It was a cold, gray morning in downtown Los Angeles, and the city seemed to have forgotten itself. The once bustling streets were quiet, save for the occasional hum of a passing car or the chatter of tourists snapping selfies in front of murals they didn't understand. On a crumbling bench in Pershing Square, a woman sat motionless, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the buildings bled into smog. Her name was Clara. Clara had been homeless for 3 years. She didn't tell herself the date anymore. It hurt too much to count the days since her life unraveled. The memories came unbidden, losing her job as an office assistant after budget cuts, then her apartment when she couldn't pay the rent, then her dignity when the shelters turned her away because they were full. She learned to adapt to the streets, though not without scars, physical and emotional. Her matted hair and weathered face made her nearly unrecognizable to anyone who might have once known her. This morning was different, though. Clara had reached a decision. She had spent the night sitting against the cold brick wall of a coffee shop, thinking about her life, the rejections, the hunger, the loneliness. There was no end to the cycle, she thought, no hand reaching down to pull her up. She had decided that this was it. Today would be the day she'd let it all go. She stood up from the bench, her knees aching from years of sleeping on concrete. She clutched the small duffel bag that held everything she owned, a tattered blanket, a water bottle, and a photo of her younger self smiling on the beach. It felt like another lifetime. Clara walked toward the overpass on 6th Street, her steps steady but her mind in chaos. Her heart thudded in her chest as the cars roared by overhead. When she reached the edge, she climbed onto the barrier and looked down. The world below seemed so far away, so indifferent. Tears blurred her vision as she whispered an apology to no one in particular. Just as she leaned forward, a voice called out behind her, "Hey, what are you doing?" Startled, Clara turned her head sharply. Standing a few feet away was a man wearing a wide-brimmed hat, sunglasses, and a scarf that looked expensive. He was slightly out of breath, as if he had been running. She stared at him, confused and annoyed. "Leave me alone," she said hoarsely, her voice cracking from lack of use. "You don't know me. Just let me do this." The man took a cautious step closer. "You're right," he said, his voice calm but insistent. "I don't know you, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stand here and let you do this." Clara narrowed her eyes. "Why do you care?" she spat. "You're just another person who'll forget I exist the second you walk away." The man removed his sunglasses, revealing eyes that were kind but piercing. For a moment, Clara thought she recognized him, but she shook the thought away. He took another step closer, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "You're wrong about that," he said. "I don't know what brought you here, but I can see you're in pain, and I can tell you that you're not invisible, not to me." Clara laughed bitterly. "Spare me the lecture. You don't understand what it's like. You probably have everything. Money, a home, people who love you. You're just another rich guy trying to play hero." The man's expression softened, and he took off his hat. Now she recognized him. Johnny Depp. The Johnny Depp. Her mouth fell open and she nearly lost her balance. He quickly stepped forward, steadying her with a gentle hand on her arm. "I know who you are," she stammered, her voice shaking. "Why are you here?" Johnny smiled faintly. "I was just walking by when I saw you. That's all. Call it fate if you want. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving until you come down from there." Clara's head spun. Of all the people in the world, why him? Why now? She looked into his eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Genuine concern. Her resolve began to waver. "Why do you care?" she asked again, this time more softly. Johnny hesitated, then said, "Because I've been where you are. Not exactly, but close enough. I've had moments where the darkness felt too heavy to carry. I know how it feels to think the world would be better off without you. But it's not true, Clara. You matter. Even if it doesn't feel like it right now, you do." Hearing her name startled her. She hadn't told him. "How do you know my name?" He chuckled softly. "It's on your bag." Clara glanced down and saw the faded name tag from her old job still stitched to the duffel. She felt a pang of embarrassment, but also something else. A flicker of humanity she thought she'd lost. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Come down," Johnny said gently. "Let's talk." If you still feel like there's no way forward after that, I won't stop you, but give me 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking." Clara hesitated. The wind tugged at her hair, and the roar of the cars below seemed to grow louder. But something in his voice, steady, earnest, almost pleading, made her pause. Slowly, she stepped down from the barrier and onto solid ground. Johnny exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Thank you," he said simply. They sat together on the curb, and for the first time in years, Clara talked. She told him about the job she lost, the family who stopped answering her calls, the nights she spent crying herself to sleep on cold pavement. Johnny listened without interrupting, his expression thoughtful and empathetic. When she finished, she felt lighter, as if unloading her story had loosened the chains around her heart. "What now?" she asked, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Johnny reached into his pocket and pulled out a card. "There's a place I know. They help people get back on their feet. I can make a call for you if you're willing. They'll take care of you." Clara stared at the card, then at him. "Why are you doing this?" He smiled. "Because someone once did it for me." For the first time in years, Clara felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as invisible as she thought, and maybe the world still held a place for her after all. The next few weeks were a whirlwind Clara hadn't expected. True to his word, Johnny made a call to the shelter, a rehabilitation program run by an organization that specialized in helping people rebuild their lives. They found her a temporary bed, fresh clothes, and access to counseling. Johnny visited her once during her first week, bringing a small bouquet of flowers and a notebook. "In case you feel like writing," he said with a smile. "It helps sometimes." Clara didn't know how to thank him. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. "I wanted to," he replied simply. "And one day, when you're in a better place, maybe you'll do it for someone else." Over the next few months, Clara worked with a case manager to apply for jobs, attended group therapy sessions, and slowly began to reconnect with the person she used to be. It wasn't easy. The scars of her time on the streets didn't heal overnight, but for the first time in years, she felt like she had a future. One day, as she was leaving the shelter to attend a job interview, she reached into her bag and found the photo of her younger self at the beach. She held it for a moment, then smiled. She was still that person, she realized. Just a little older, a little stronger, and a little more determined to keep moving forward. Months turned into a year, and Clara found herself standing in a modest but clean apartment, her first real home in years. It was small, just a studio with a kitchenette, but to her, it was a palace. She had a job now as a receptionist at a local nonprofit, the same organization that had helped her rebuild her life. Each day, she greeted people who were where she had once been, offering them the same kindness and hope that had been offered to her. One rainy evening, Clara sat at her small desk in the apartment, flipping through the notebook Johnny had given her. The pages were now filled with her thoughts, sketches, and small poems, an ongoing reflection of her journey. She decided to write a letter, not to Johnny directly, but to anyone who might be struggling as she had been. She wanted to tell them that it was possible to climb out of the darkness, to rebuild a life even when it seemed shattered beyond repair. In her letter, she wrote, "To whoever finds themselves on the edge, remember this: you are not invisible. Even when the world seems cold and indifferent, there are people who care, people who will see you. Don't give up. Give life one more chance. You matter more than you know." Clara's letter became the seed of something larger. Encouraged by her colleagues, she started sharing her story at community events, inspiring others with her resilience. People responded to her words with tears and applause. But most importantly, they responded with hope. Clara became a beacon for those who thought they had no future. Years later, Clara stood in a packed auditorium as the keynote speaker for a major charity gala. The organization she now represented had helped hundreds of people find their way back to stability and dignity. She looked out at the audience and began her speech with the story of a gray morning in Los Angeles when a stranger saved her life. "And that's the thing about kindness," she said, her voice steady. "It doesn't just save one person. It creates a ripple that can change countless lives." As the crowd rose to their feet in applause, Clara felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Somewhere, she thought, Johnny Depp might be smiling, knowing that a single moment of compassion had transformed not just one life, but many, and Clara knew she would carry that legacy forward, proving every day that no one is truly invisible and that even the smallest act of kindness can change the world.